their thoughts briefly on, what comes to their mind when they think of coloniality, of spirituality and aesthetics. So that is an open question, for everyone. What comes to your mind when you think of coloniality, of spirituality and aesthetics?
Perhaps we can park this and let it be part of our engagement session after Sikhumbuzo. Then we can discuss this and what maybe we can speak about what you had in mind or what you now have in mind, or just like general contribution to the program. So yeah, maybe we should give the platform to Andile for her reflection item on any of the previous lectures of choice, and maybe she will also share about her experience with this module.
Yes.
Andile?
Okay, thank you so much. I'm not gonna have my video on because of network issues. Is it okay if I share screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I just did a presentation because very short. Oh no, sorry. Very short, so that I just have a sense of what I'm talking about. Okay. Okay. So this is my reflection on the module, and before I even go further, it's just to say thank you to the program team, because really I've learned a lot, and being able to name things that I wasn't able to name before, and being able to recognize coloniality of being, of power, of knowledge in some of the novels that I've read and that have resonated with me. So this has been really a great experience. So I'll just move to the next slide. So I've chosen a very short line from Koleka Putuma's collection, and there's a poem called Black Joy, where she talks about, about the mere fact that Black people or Black experiences are not just about, pain, that we do have parts of us that, we have other experiences. So, and I'm just showing other, pictures there of women that are just, expressing themselves and being happy. And I mean, when I started the year, my interest were around growing my knowledge in feminist theory. But I think now that it's like November, it makes more sense, feminist theory and decoloniality in the books that I've read this year. I'm just gonna move to the next slide. So I'm just gonna reflect on a session we held this year, Coloniality of Being, Land, Life, and Nature. There's a line, our speaker, I have him, I have his picture here because I don't really remember his name, but I think, Mbadi, you referred to him as the elder. He said something, and this something is something that I've been saying to myself and saying to other people. It really, that line, he says, colonization dislocates people, not only from the land, but from the sense of who they are, the way that they identify with themselves, and their identity with all else that makes their being, but most importantly, with how they relate with one another. I think this was a very, I don't know, it was like an aha moment for me, and helped me understand, you know, being a Black, you know, South African woman raised in KwaZulu-Natal, raised in a farm where my mom worked as a domestic worker, and going to a school that was, you know, did not have, you know, enough facilities to equip us to be the best versions of ourselves, for example, and just witnessing myself walking a very long distance to the farm school, and witnessing the children that my mom would take care of being driven to school. You know, there was a sense of, with this quote, there was a sense of understanding, that feeling of, you know, inside you that is like unsettled in a way, you know, there's like trying to make sense of it. So when he said that when you are moved, when people are moved from their land, and I mean, this touches on intergenerational trauma, if I may, the being is also dislocated. So it was a really fascinating, you know, thing to hear, and I kind of felt seen, and it also helped me understand collective amnesia, which is Putuma's collection, in a more deeper level, and so that, yeah, it was really great. And I'll just move to the next slide, and I'll just, so that I don't waste time, I'll just talk briefly about my plans for my portfolio. As you would have seen, I'm a theory of literature student during my 4th year. And my interest is in coloniality of being, and, you know, and the self, and reimagining ourselves and defining ourselves, you know, for ourselves. And also, and this module has helped me, you know, recognize this as it's seen in this quote, you know, there are certain things that you cannot really tap into, but you can feel them. You know, you can feel that they exist around you. And I mean, you know, 1994 happened, you know, we are supposed to be living in a democratic, you know, South Africa, but there are certain, but you also, when you go home, there are things that just, you know, break your heart. And it was great to have a name, you know, for those things. Yeah, so my plans for my portfolio is basically, as a theory of literature student, my interests are, you know, vary. You know, I'm writing a novel, but I also try and write poetry, because I mean, poetry is quite hard. And so I thought it would be a great challenge to myself to focus on writing poetry. So so it's basically, my project will consist of 3 poems, and there will be a poetry session. And I mean, because of COVID, I had thought it to be for it to be on Zoom, but it can be a hybrid, and I plan on it to be a hybrid. I'm based in Cape Town, so if anybody is based in Cape Town and would like to be part of the poetry session, please let me know. It will be hosted on a Saturday, the 8th of January. I will announce the times, and I plan on the invitations to go out mid-December. So basically, the outcome of the project will be poems that aim to educate and create discussions around decoloniality, and just the coloniality of the being, and how, you know, yeah. So it's just going to be a platform where we share our lived experiences and talk about them and just try to find a way to, you know, yeah, freedom of expression being the premise and just defining ourselves for ourselves. I don't know why that line is like dominant, but it's there. And I also, there's this quote that was said by Dr. Dingi. I don't know if, I think I'm saying his name properly in the last session. He said, get rid of doubt, get rid of fear, believe that you can be who you want to be. It's as generic as it may be, but I think it's a very important quote or a sentence for Black people or people that have lived in disadvantaged communities, because we've never really gotten the thing around that you can do it. You know, I mean, I study part-time and I work as well, and you do find yourself in situations where you know, environments that aren't friendly, and and sometimes you doubt that you can do it. You know, I'm a communications officer by profession, and I've been doing it for a couple of years. But because it's been such a difficult journey, sometimes you tend to doubt yourself because you've been, you know, your existence has been ridiculed for so long that you, in spaces like that, where there are people that haven't self-reflected, you know, yeah, and you tend to go to that place of fear. You tend to go to that place of doubting your ability. So this really resonated with me, and I'm thankful for it. I'm almost done. So basically, I also invite everyone that is here, and obviously I am going to share invitations with some of my friends on Facebook and Twitter. If you would like to be part of the poetry session in January, this is my email address, and you can just let me know. And before I go, I just want to share something that I've written. This is not to say that this poem will be there, but I'll just read it for you very quickly. No one knows how to bring this country out of chaos, out to shore, out for air. They only bring it out for a show, a performance, the rainbow defining a bleeding nation. No one knows how to make this country breathe, how to make this country heal, how to make this country deal with a mind so bruised it lays waste like waste, pile after pile. No one knows how to reconcile this pain of the bodies we've buried, the tears we've cried. No one knows how to comfort our fears. Every step we take, the world below us dislocates, signaling our searching and wanting souls. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I am done. That was my reflection. I hope I didn't take too long.
No, you didn't at all. And you went well above and beyond the call of duty. Thank you so much for your contribution. Could we have Msuthu Khademe to offer their rendition? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like also to share my screen so that I hope you can be able to see my presentation.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, I'm trying to. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone, and I'm going to make my reflection. Also, I've got some serious challenges with the network, so I'll only share my screen. Decoloniality, African thought, discourse, and critique. I put there a journey of deep reflection. As Mbembe states that coloniality Oh, sorry. As Mbembe state that coloniality was an enterprise of appropriate. Okay, I'm trying to. Some of the screen of the meeting is on, so I'm unable to read some the whole. But the overall result was effectively to silence the history. Can I do this? Okay. Mbembe state that colonization was an enterprise of appropriation, familiarizing, and utilization. The overall result was the effectively to silence African history, knowledge, and autonomy. That's what have made the crust of everything for me as a student. And looking at decoloniality, and we went through that journey that we spoke about, the deep journey took us to the 10 theses of coloniality, coloniality of knowledge, coloniality of being, land, life, nature, coloniality of race. And today we are to embark on the coloniality of spirituality and aesthetics. Now, what have been more to me, or what have been open to me when we look at the 10 theses of Maldonado Torres, was to reflect on the knowledge, the being, and the power that have suppressed or that have clouded us, that we are not able to achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve. But on the screen, you can be able to see that I have entitled the question, thinking, and theory, and theorizing, which are the which falls on the thesis number 10 that Maldonado speaks about. That in order for us as a nation, or in order for us as students to be able to decolonize ourselves, we need to ask relevant questions, we need to be thinking, we need also to theorize what comes in our way. But at the same time, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. And one of those questions are, has the last formal racial autocracy in Azania been buried? To understand where we are and where we come from, we need to be pushing forward, we need to be advancing the question of us as a nation, of us as a people, and ensure that we are formally out of any racial boundaries that we might be finding ourselves. And the other question that we need to ask ourselves is that the new creature that is now called a society and we find ourselves in, is it a clear and an understandable creature that we can be able to identify ourselves with, and we can be able to form part of it as a nation in Azania? And if I may jump to the fourth one, the social problems such as poverty, marginalization, violence and abuse, crime, corruption and intolerance that still form part of our experiences as the Black majority in South Africa. Has all these things been addressed? Has all these things been put up openly in the table that they can be discussed, and that we can be able as a nation and as South Africans be able to say, yes, we have put all these things in the table, and then we are able to work towards decoloniality. And these are the three things also Lady Cele, Andile Cele, that have just pointed out. Irrespective of how, whether you go clockwise or anti-clockwise, these are the things that encompasses or challenge us today. Coloniality of power, being, or knowledge. Whether you go power, knowledge, being, it depends where you find yourself as an individual, in order that you are able to identify that coloniality in your space. As I've alluded to the thesis of Maldonado Torres, the 10th one, where he speaks about decoloniality, is the collective project, meaning that There are no individuals that we can be able to quote in order that they help us to advance what we want. But now and today, the time that we are living in, we are still poor, we are still landless, we are still marginalized. And this song still we can be able to sing, and it's been sang from generation to generation, that speaks about our land. Therefore, we need also as the people to reflect back and go back to the song and ask ourselves that we've been singing this song, if need be, we can be in a position to speak about it poetically and ask ourselves that have we been able to see the prophecy that is being revealed by the song itself. I'll just read it in Zulu because of in English, it doesn't give me the clear understanding of the challenges that I go through as an individual. It says, Tina sizwe esinsundu, sikhalela izwe lethu, elathathwa ngabamhlophe, sithi mabayeke umhlaba wethu. And these are still the challenges that we find ourselves in. And land cannot be classified only in two categories, meaning that as it is being categorized today, that land is for farming and residential. And more importantly, we understand as Africans or people from Azania that land is economic, land is political, and land is spiritual and cultural. I hope that today's session will be in a position to answer the spiritual part of the land itself. Then we can be able to go forward with what we want to do. Now, in conclusion, I want us to draw closer to the 1994 failed exodus. Why I'm saying that we have a failed exodus, I am looking at what Dr. Mdingi have seriously put out to us about the Black Pharaoh who is able to replicate its magicians who are not able to swallow the evil of the past. Therefore, we are not able to exodus ourselves from the bondages that we find ourselves, from the hindrances that we find ourselves, in order that we are able to find a new future as Azania. And this, he claimed, he said it clearly that for the mere fact that we have South Africa still being called South Africa, it is a clear resemblance that we haven't yet achieved what we wanted to achieve. Therefore, also when we look back on the role of the work that was done by apartheid itself, and looking back on what the late F.W. de Klerk was trying to say to us as a nation, that according to him, he always ran away from the fact that apartheid is apartheid. There is nothing called separate development. And he failed to acknowledge what challenges we faced as a nation. The only thing that he was able to acknowledge is that apartheid was morally wrong and unjustifiable, and it was not able to heal the pain that is in us, the pain, the hurt, and the indignity against us as the majority in South Africa. But also he claimed that he is proud of the constitution that we have, because of the constitution that we have is the one that upholds holds supreme the rights of the minority. And one of the things that can be in a position to stand today and hold against him, he's even in his deathbed and in his interview that he made, he failed to acknowledge and state categorically without reservation that apartheid is a crime against humanity, because he was aware that those that are left behind will be in a position to suffer the consequences of what apartheid has done. So we need to continue as a nation, we need to continue as people in collective to shout our voice high and ensure that we categorize apartheid as a crime against humanity. Now, how am I planning to do my project? I'm looking at the sheer role on the pulpit. The aim of the project is small in the sense that is based on a particular and a small church, the Mahon Evangelical Church in South Africa, where we are looking at the role of a woman in the pulpit. And then we can be able to see, sorry, I hope you still see my screen. And the project scope is we are able to identify the gaps that women are playing in the church. If we fail to identify their role as women in the church, therefore we are able not to see the need to go forward. Now, also to be able as a practical theology student to put the biblical interpretation and define definitely what does the Bible say in relations to the role of women in the church, the role of women in the society, the role of women in a pastoral ministry as a whole. So we hope that with this, we can be able, as a church and as a collective, be able to advance the cause of the women in the church. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful presentation. I think I should give over to our third speaker, Ayanda Mdokwana.
Thank you very much. Just to continue, okay. Firstly, I would like to start as I share this reflection of mine. I would like to start off by expressing my gratitude towards the lecturers of this module. This particular module, firstly, let me rather explain what I am trying to get to. Firstly, prior towards engaging with the content of this particular module, resistance, of course, there's always been some form of resistance, the protests and all of these. But what this particular module has done, it has assisted me in particular, to actually critically look at the ways in which one gets to resist, and so, as I said, there's racism, but sometimes you don't get to critically look at it as this particular module has introduced to us, in the form of course, colonialism and coloniality. So, with that said, this particular module assisted us a lot in terms of critically looking at the ways in which we express our resistance against coloniality and colonialism. So that that has helped a lot. And Andy Letlele makes, quotes that, as she quoted that beautiful statement that Dr. Khulani Mdingi quoted, made, and this was, of course, you can be, get rid of the fear, get rid of the belief, get rid of the fear, and believe that you can be who you want to be. Very interesting, very interesting statement. And this particular statement, of course, that Dr. Mdingi also made, it was also made, of course, it's also made in reference to the fact that that white, in light of white antagonism, where blacks are imprisoned by the Western epistemologies, ontologies, and all forms, of these of philosophical discourses, of course, that are structuralized. I don't know if that word exists, but so one thing, one thing we do get to realize is that one can be who it is possible to become who we want to be, but we also get to realize that that is it's not a task that is it's not something that you can take lightly. It is something that is very serious. It is a form of resistance, something that is a little bit completely different to what white antagonism would propose, and that is defining whiteness as a means of oppressing Black people. For Black people to become who they are requires to counter these epistemologies, these ontologies, which is a form of resistance. And I make mention of this, of course, because Dr. Dingy's words actually touched me a lot in that presentation. When I was referring, when in the Q&A that yes, in the Q&A session, where he mentioned three things, and he said, one needs to think, one needs to do, or one needs to either betray. Of course, in the context of resistance and the decolonial discourse. And for me, this was very important because one of the things that has always been important for me, or critical for me, was how the whole idea of having a perfect Black picture, where you can utilize that form of actually resisting, whereas even our form of resistance, as claiming Black ontologies and Black epistemologies, they in and of themselves are imperfect, but they also create rooms of other discourses, that have not been encompassed by those who have moved, those who have gone before, such as your Steve Bantu Biko and all of the other guys. So one of the things that was very important for me was how deep the issue of colonialism and slavery is. And I want to share this. I'm not going to be long, but I want to actually share this, and this is something that touched me a lot with regard to the depth after listening to what Dr. Mdingi, of course, had to mention in light of those two quotes. So I recently read a paper of the grade 12s, right? They were writing their first additional language, English, and it was first additional language, English, and the question one. This was 2021. The very first question dealt with recycling. The importance of recycling. And so in this particular piece, what takes place is that in the first paragraph, what they get to discuss is the fact that in Olympics, in the Olympic races, what usually used to happen is that they used to use gold as medals. But as time went on, there's been a change. And they rather started utilizing recycled material, as medals, right? And then from the second to the last paragraph, in fact, they start dealing about the plastic, and then all of the other recyclable materials and how it is important for, how important recycling is. And one of the things that struck me in this particular piece of this grade 12 paper was the fact that, in our minds, once we get to hear about gold, we get to hear about a scarce commodity. So how do we then begin to think about gold within the context of recycling? Plastic and all of the other stuff you can speak about. So one of the things that came to my mind was why on earth did the author of this particular text place gold in here? And I started to actually think about this and reflected about this a little bit. And one of the things, of course, that came to mind was the fact that we know that during the Olympics, ancient Olympics, there was a lot of slaves, to a certain extent, were not allowed to participate in Olympics, making all of these types of stuff, primarily one side, primarily to a certain extent, affording white people the opportunity of having gold. Whereas, as we move on, this particular scarce commodity within the context of coloniality and colonialism, colonial efforts where gold is extracted and moved to other countries to be produced, and whereas even our athletes, in fact, do not actually get the privilege of actually wearing these particular medals in and of themselves, and where some of their fathers and their forefathers even worked in the mines, extracting this gold, and to know that, when they get an opportunity finally to participate in the Olympics, a recyclable material is what they, to a certain extent, are worth, whereas gold in and of itself is not as common as plastic is, but gold in and of itself is a scarce commodity, you know. So as much as this particular piece for the grade 12s was something that they had to learn, you know, it was just the basic of, it was just testing, it was just about testing their comprehension, you know, their ability to comprehend things. It is interesting to see how such messages, for me, you know, could be a little bit, you know, weaved into this particular message, sending out a message. And of course, what stood out as well was one question that said, South Africa is the hub of recycling. South Africa is one of the hubs of recycling, and the question was, okay, interesting, where gold and all of these other minerals are found, you know, and you know, so it was very interesting how South Africa, you know, that has suffered as well because of colonialism, you know, and this extraction of gold and making a lot of black people suffer, you know, and just putting it out there and saying recyclable materials, you know, yes, so recyclable materials are much more important in bringing gold into that particular narrative. And so, you know, so I think, you know, what Dr. Mdingi's passage, basically the whole idea of thinking, doing, you know, it, to a certain extent, it helps us to be able to critically reflect on some of the content that we encounter in a day-to-day experience. And so one thing that this particular module and the last discourse had for me was the fact that it allowed me to engage some of the realities that we actually get to face, you know, that has to do with blackness, even within the context of actually meeting other people that are oppressed, but, you know, that are not aware of the fact that they are oppressed. So in light of that, you know, so this particular module has assisted me a lot in terms of trying to understand these and being critical in a way of resisting white antagonism. And so yeah, so that is what I have appreciated so far. And of course, with regards to the program that I am conducting, or the project that I am conducting, it's entitled Das Definitief and the DAL, you know, the socio-economic impact of Afrikaans in the community of Pabalelo, right? Pabalelo is a community situated in Uppington, Northern Cape, South Africa. And interesting enough, a lot of black people in this particular community, but black people that are not conversant with their home languages, you know. And so, you know, so this of course has posed a lot of challenges, you know, in terms of other people that come towards the province and also towards Uppington, because, you know, they have to readjust, you know, because they cannot seem to find any they cannot find any resemblance to what they are used to. People, of course, some people who have seeked for jobs as well, one of the difficult things that they've had to do was, in fact, to first learn Afrikaans in order to actually be able to get a job, you know. And so my project actually deals with the impact that Afrikaans has in Uppington, more particular in Pabalelo. Yes, I think let me end there, not continue further. Sorry if I went over my time.
Sikhumbuzo Makhandula, who is a visual artist and photography lecturer in Fine Arts Department at Rhodes University, whose practice-based research traces and interrogates the material culture of Black intellectual history and the knowledge system embedded in Iminombo, Izibongo, Imbali, and Ingoma. Makhandula's solo exhibitions include Ingoma kaTiyo Soga in 2019 at Iziko, South African National Gallery in Cape Town, the 1820 Monument in Makhanda as well, and Zizimase in 2019 at the District Sis Museum, Ubuzwe in 2017 at Room Gallery, and In Search of a Nation 2016 at Njerere Jelele Art Station in Zimbabwe. Makhandula has also exhibited in a number of group exhibitions, which include Ngoma, Art and Cosmology at Johannesburg Art Gallery, African Voices, Confronting the Frontiers of Reality at National Gallery of Zimbabwe, and also my collection at Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Arts in New York, and towards intersections at UNISA Art Gallery. Makhandula is also a member of Makhanda Black Collective, an interdisciplinary and intergenerational project consisting of artists, social justice, and environmental activists, parents, students from and around Makhanda. Thank you so much for being here with us, Sikhumbuzo Makhandula, and receiving our invitation. We are looking forward to what you have prepared for us. So we'll give Sikhumbuzo the platform, and then we'll open for an engagement session. Sikhumbuzo?
Oh, thank you, Mbali. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, awesome.
Do you mind switching on your...
Yes, yes. I don't mind at all.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all well. Thank you for welcoming me or inviting me today to come talk to all of you. I've prepared a short presentation for you, which is like in the format of a multimedia, where I'll be playing some songs, I'll be playing some videos, short videos. I'll be also doing some short readings in between. So at this point, I'd just like to share my screen. I think I can be able to. Okay, let me. Okay. Are you able to see my screen, everyone? So,
Yes, we were able to see your screen.
okay, so to start off today's presentation, I've titled my talk and presentation today, Kumele Kufe Umuntu Nakabani. This is basically reflecting about the current times that we're in during the lockdown, sort of not lockdown, but like sort of a COVID moment, but also trying to synthesize like sort of certain epochs that we've kind of gone through. But specifically for this particular talk today, I'm interested in elements of colonial spirituality of the empire that give rise to the African independent churches. And also I'm interested in Black theology of liberation, which later on I'll expand on better sort of defined by Professor Vuyani Velem, who was a theology lecturer at UNISA. And also I'm interested in the interface between Amaqaba, the autochthons, and Amaguquga, the converts. I'm also then interested in with the interface of the two, how then did they negotiate ukuhlonipha isithunzi and seriti. Isithunzi in Sesotho it's called seriti, which refers to someone's aura, not necessarily a shadow, but also isithunzi in photographic terms. So to open this talk, it'll be apt for me to start off with a song that I'll play, then it'll set up the tone for today. Sorry. So I'll just
Sikhumbuzo, you needed to select share sound.
okay.
But I can play the song on my side because we already had it on our playlist for today. Is that fine?
That's fine. That's fine. So if with other videos and stuff, would I not be able to play some?
Yeah, so you need to, when you share, you need to say share and then include computer sound. It's
Okay.
yeah, and then
Okay. All right.
yeah. Are you able to do it?
I don't think I'm okay. Let me just check. Okay. Oh yeah, I see.
Okay,
So I
then
should do.
okay, let
Okay.
me stop sharing and then you do that.
Okay. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll start the song basically. Can you hear the song?
Are you sharing your screen?
Okay. Yeah, I think I am sharing my screen. Okay.
So you say share content and then it's the first option. La purpose says include computer sound.
Okay.
You play the song? Yeah.
And then
Yeah. Yeah, use your phone. We can hear the song.
Intlupheko iyadabulisa, ayisifanele njengabantu abamnyama, noma sikulesimo thina, akusho ukuthi kumele siphile kanjena. Uzojika izinto, jika izinto, jika izinto. Uzojika izinto, jika izinto, jika izinto. Ukungazethembi kuyadabukisa, akusifanele njengabantu abamnyama, noma siwuthanda ukuba thina, akusho ukuthi kumele siphile kanjena. Uzojika izinto, jika izinto, jika izinto. Uzojika izinto, jika izinto, jika izinto. Sinamagama, bantu abamnyama, asikholwa, bantu abamnyama, sikhethiwe, bantu abamnyama, masakhane, sizobona, zojika izinto. Ukubulalana kuyadabukisa, akusifanele njengabantu abamnyama, noma sinawo ukuba thina, akusho ukuthi kumele siphile kanjena. Zojika izinto, jika izinto, jika izinto. Uzojika izinto, jika izinto, jika izinto. Sinamacala, bantu abamnyama,
All right. So that was Zoe Muticha, who the song titled Abantu. The song is actually quite interesting because, in a sense, it has biblical tones. It also has tones of ukukoza and tones of caution, but also tones of appraisal, reminding the Black nation about the importance, reverence to the spirits, the seen and the unseen. So I thought today when we talk about colonial spiritualities and aesthetics, so one of the things I do think about is ways in which we honor the people of the land, and also when we talk about the people, also what do we refer to, not just the people but also humanity, thinking also not just that but also thinking about nature and environment at large. So in this instance, so today's structure, really, the way it's set up is that, or rather how I'll be speaking to the aesthetic form. It is in two form. One, presenting sort of cover books, which these are cover books these are cover books of certain readings that I'm currently embarking on, but also I'm engaging with these readings in my own personal professional work, but also I'm teaching these also to, because as a photography lecturer, I do think about like what informs images and how I read images, and also importantly, how I think about form and composition, not just aesthetic, but also to think about form. And then the other aspect I'd like us to think about today is it's something that I call the sonic aesthesis. And the sonic aesthesis really speaks to that which is, it's ephemeral, but also it speaks to the trace of the sound or the trace of a song, and the way it reverberates on the body and it stays on the body as a reminder, but also how sound vibrates and leaves kind of pointers or cues to a particular time, moments, and spaces. So in this instance, I'm presenting a cover book by Isanuse Okredo Mutwa, where I'm interested in how we think about ukuxhumana nendalo, meaning how we're connected to nature and the environment, and also to think about the conservation, therefore, of the built environment, not just built as in just thinking about the architecture, but also thinking about how do we conserve spaces, but also what is our own relationship to indalo. So some of the key points in this book that it covers is that in old Africa, every tribe had an animal that is regarded as its totem, an animal after which the tribe had been named by its founders. It was a sacred duty of the tribe to ensure that the animal after which it was named was never harmed within the confines of its territory. Old Africans knew that it was not enough simply to protect those animals which grazed the tribal totem. It was essential to protect those animals which preyed upon the sacred animal. But also, as we think about the aesthetic, So one of the things I think about is that within ourselves, or the way in which we self-identify, one of the ways in which we self-identify, or rather like how we use orality, thinking about is Tagazelo, thinking about clan names. And I think about how when I introduced myself today, I didn't really quite properly kind of introduce myself, because the idea of the Istagazelo, or rather using the oral histories and what is embedded within that, because Mina, I'm from Sikhumbuzo, from Amandlazi, Oswelele, Opungano Mtimkulu. And also I'm born of isiZulu, I'm isiZulu of the Amanchilibe or Bangumdumane. And Amanchilibe originally, they originate from Lesotho and moved to South Africa. Amandlazi, the word Ndlazi, it's a name of, it's my totem basically, which refers to a bird. But also in this regard, I'd like for us to kind of watch this video that Ubabu Mutwa again expands on this idea of how we are connected to Izilo and these totems. So I will just play this video quickly for everyone just to.
The Zulu people say, ulwazi luvela olwandle. The knowledge comes from the sea. Our people believe that many centuries ago, a race of intelligent creatures of various kinds chaperoned the human race into this world in which we are in exile. And members of this race went into the sea to become what we today call dolphins, amahlengetho. Over the centuries, dolphins and whales sent knowledge via dreams to human beings. The whales told us all about God. The dolphins told us all about wisdom and art and other forms of positive creativity. We black people believe that these dolphins are not fishes. They are amahlengetho, the saviors. They are people. They have a kingdom under the sea. They have stories that they tell to their children. And they have hopes for the future. We say that they came with their great emperor Wowane from the star called Sirius by the white people many millennia ago. These stones in ancient Greece, in ancient Africa, and in other parts of the world were originally used for focusing human thought and for looking into the future. This is what I am doing now. I am trying to visualize the eye of a dolphin and to call it here using this most ancient of objects. Wowane selected Vundu, his biggest dolphin, Vundu was entrusted with a tablet made of gold. The tablet had inscriptions on it, bringing to the lands of human beings the greatest and the simplest law of all. Do unto others as ye would that other people do to you. The goddess Nanana. These designs represent various worlds and stars which were once our heritage in the cosmos. However, we will not find this world because we ourselves destroyed it many millennia ago. In a far eastern country that I visited, I saw flesh being sold in little boxes, the flesh of creatures that I regard as gods and as brothers. Human beings must stop this destruction. It is meaningless, purposeless, and it bankrupts human minds. The killing of these holy creatures must stop. Please stop killing them. Many are the mysteries of Africa. Many the mysteries of my country. Many are the stories that are yet to be told, and many more those that will never be told.
Okay. So in this regard, I would like to move to the second slide, where I'm looking at ukufika kwabaMwega, the arrival of the missionary settlers. And in this part, I'm looking specifically on the visual on the left-hand side, where we're looking at a kraal. And inside the kraal, there is almost like an altar setting where there are 2 candles and a calabash. And for me, again, this is a typical moment of encounter between the autochthones and those who are converted, and how basically in this regard, I'm thinking specifically about the arrival, and also to think about the kraal, where a lot of Black people's kettles would be captured in, or rather would be kept in, but also thinking about where our form of divination, our form of spirituality is actually practiced. When a new baby is born, the baby would actually be introduced to Amakhandi, at the gates of the kraal. But also with the interface or the arrival of the missionary settlers. So I have a text here where it's an intro, or rather like an opening from a poem by Uyale Manisi, titled Ingagi Esonzakalisayo, the poem that wrote our destruction. So I'll read it in isiXhosa, and then on the right hand side, it's also, there will be like an interpretation of it in English. So I'll read it in isiXhosa. Kwavela igqwirha lingaziwa mntu, kwaqala ingqobhoko yangena, sayamkela ingqobhoko sathi samkela uThixo, kanti loo Thixo sithi siyamamkela. Le Bhayibhile izele nomnyezi, iphethwe yindoda ekhola ijonge entshonalanga, apha ngaphambili ngumqukumbelo. So in essence, basically, what Uyale Manisi in this text is sort of what it captures really is with the arrival of the missionaries and the kind of a destruction, but also the problem. But also I call it ukuthwetyulwa komuntu omnyama, how really Black people got bewitched, if you want to put it in that term. So, but also I think in this regard, looking at the image on the left, which is a cover of Professor Ubidam Chose, I am thinking of how the space of a kraal and also how the altar is actually in the central core, where now there has been an invasion, but also the invasion then has ultimately or culminated to that. Also, I'm thinking Uguti with the song that we started off with of Uzo Mudiha, Abantu, also as a reminder, as a cautionary measure to think about that which we have gotten, the wealth, how not just religion, but also I think when it comes to spirituality and also how we're connected to animals, how we're connected to ukuhlaba imbuzi, ukuhlaba inkomo, ukuhlaba isilo, how these basically would be a kraal, would be a space where it's where these things would be. You would go and ask the living dead to actually sort of embrace, but also help open up, by ukhlatshelwa of, or rather with the slaughtering of, or an offering of a cow, a sheep, or a goat. But subsequently, there has been an invasion, and there has been an infiltration that has entered the core center of ourselves. And also, the kraal is actually like the core center of what we consider as umsamo wekaya, because that's where, when we give our supplications to the living dead, to our ancestors, when we go to ask for rain, or when we ask for better crops. So the space of a kraal, it is a space also which is quite an interesting space, because there is a lot of tension, or rather dual conversation, that happened or take place in the space of a kraal, which is a sacred space. But also the idea of divination, and the idea of a prayer, and the idea of ukukhuleka, and the idea of izithakazelo, how the interface of these and those who have actually been converted, and how they now at a sort of, there's a nemesis that they're now faced with, because at the same time they claim that ukuthi bangamaqobhoko or amaguquka, and at the same time they want to adhere to sort of like the Christian Judeo religion at the same time, which is like not necessarily to do with spirituality, but more religion, but also it's a way of how divination takes place. It's a way of understanding the core essence of who they are and what they're connected to. So moving on, before I move on, there's a provocation then that I'd like to play here. Let me just go to the video on. I have it on readily. It's yeah. So the video is by Amaata Adu. Probably most of you would be familiar with the video, but I thought it's quite apt also to capture what I'm trying in this particular part to pronounce the foreground.
The thing is that, as far as I'm concerned, since we met you people 500 years ago, look at us. We've given everything. You are still taking. It's true. I mean, where will the whole Western world be without Africa? Our cocoa, our timber, our gold, our diamonds, our platinum, our whatever. Everything you are is us. I am not saying it, it's a fact. And in return for all of this, what have we got? Nothing. Anti-personnel indoctrination against ourselves. If you go and cook your horrible diseases like AIDS, you say it is us. You brought us tuberculosis. We didn't have this big cough until white people came here. In exchange for Africa giving Europe 500 solid years of our people, I mean, not Europe, the Western world, of our human beings to work your canes, to dig your gold, to take in gold itself, diamond, I mean, you know, fish, peanuts, palm oil, everything. In exchange for that, we have got nothing. Nothing. And you know it. Nothing. And you look upon, you know, white folks look upon us like monkeys. It is true. It's in your literature. Hey, you know, some of your best thinkers have said this about us. Have you heard of all these Germans? Have you heard? Yes. They said Lord Burton, people like that, they said we don't even have the brain of animals. That's what we've got from you people.
But don't you think that this is over now?
Over where? Is it over? Who said that 8 came from the green monkey? Is it over? Is it over?
Well, if this is your impression, do you think that you can ever forgive us?
It's not a question of forgiveness. I have nothing against you. My point is that you did and you are doing for your survival what is necessary. We can't blame you for that. The fact that we didn't do enough for our own survival and we are still not doing enough for our survival, that is not your problem. You know, even everybody that God has created has a sense of survival. You know, and if we don't develop it, we can't blame white people. You came here because you needed these things. You took gunpowder from the Chinese. You needed them to shoot people. The thing is that...
Okay, so now moving on, I will move on in a part where I called Babonimbola, Ababobonu Buntu Betu, meaning that so on the left I have a cover, it's a cover of Art Africa, and in the cover you have it's a photograph by Ida Molune. Ida Molune is an Ethiopian photographer who generally work in a kind of a feminist approach where she uses in a lot of her photographs, she foregrounds women and also photographs like the landscape within Ethiopia and East Africa. But in this particular photograph, what we're looking at is a lady who's adorned in red ochre, both sort of earth, you know. And I'm thinking of this with the previous slide, with also talking to the arrival of the encounter between the autochthones and the missionary settlers, and also So in a book titled Masipagule, Dr. Nokuzola Mdende states that imbola ibiyeyona nto siyiqabayo emizimbeni yethu nasesikhumbeni. Imbola iye yadityaniswa nobuyedeni ngaba belungu. Isimanga ke sokuba kwa aba bantu babesithi xa siqabe imbola yethu singabayedeni. Kuqale kwabona bayokuzombela bathi bakugqiba suke bayithengisela kwathina bona abayiqaba. Loo nto ide yadala iqhalo lesiXhosa elithi umona wasemlungwini ubandezela iqhitywa ungaliqabi. Here Mdende notes the contradiction in the association of imbola, which is the red ochre, with evil. She also emphasizes how the same red ochre has been commercialized by the very same missionaries who condemn it to be applied. This led to a composition of an idiom which translates to "white means jealousy of that which he does not use," referring to red ochre. So Babonimbola, Babubonu Ubuntu Betu, the title really sort of intimates towards they see red ochre but they don't see our humanity, is a way to analyze how the dignity of humanity of Black people have been stripped and violated in the encounter with the settlers and missionaries. So moving on, Umlindelo Wamakholwa. So I'm interested in those who were identified as Amakholwa, and subsequently with the advent of the African initiated churches. So one of the key things, so on the left, it's a book cover it's a book cover by a photographer called Usabelo Mlangeni. The book has contents of photographs from the Zionist Church. But in the book, actually, the gist of the book really, it has key questions which I want us to think about and also to kind of to mull over. So one of the key questions that are contained as we move along to thinking about the role of the Black missionaries, the role of the advent of the Black in the African initiated churches. Ever since the first succession of African Christians from European-led mission churches, the question that has bothered the missionary is this: what does the African Christian want? What happens when left to themselves? And at this point, or rather these questions really, what I'm sort of intimating toward is that how Amakholwa, when they're left by themselves, what kind of aesthetic, what kind of, when I talk about the aesthetic and form, I'm thinking of like, in which ways did they want to be represented? This is through the song, and also it is through the rhythm of the hymn or amahubo or islabelelo. And here particularly, I have a video that I'd like to play. I think it's from YouTube. Let me just try to play that. Okay, let me just go to. Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the day you met Jesus?
The day your life was transformed forever.
But have you...
Sikhumbuzo 128. Ongiswele imilomo
So in this regard, and in this particular video that I've just played now, it is a sort of a video from Ibandla Lamashembe, Ligashembe. But I think particularly what I was interested in this video, as a form of the aesthetic form, I was thinking about the Islabelo and thinking about Ikhobo that is being sung. And also I was thinking about the manner in which basically how the term Ukuhuba or Ikhobo from Islabelo, the idea of repetition, the idea of how the sonic really, it really kind of cuts deep, or rather, it speaks to how more than just it being like a sulfatonic, but I think it is a way in which Black people, or rather within Black churches, actually, how the idea of repetition and how Ukuhuba and Oguhuba also linked it to Izithakazelo, But also I was interested in the form of the garments in which are being adorned, where they are wearing white, and also particularly all the males seems to be adorning what is known as tolo in the head, which is basically it's a leopard skin hide that they would have on the head, which is quite interesting within these Black initiate churches, actually, or African initiate churches, how reverence to Izilo, reverence to these different animals, has a way in which, like, it's actually something actively that is part of the representation of who they are. It also speaks to as within the African initiate churches like that, how people want to see themselves, but also how much the way in which there is a sense, or rather there's an essence of what they are connected to, and also which ties into what Ubabu Mutwa Isanusa was speaking about in terms of how much really we are connected to nature, but also our ideas and how these things, the forms of what we have adopted and make use, and also thinking about how then ourselves are represented, and how these spaces become quite political in how they are formed, their formation, and also their social structuring, actually. Knowing Wuti, everyone has a role, I'm imagining Wuti, the whole essence of the church is also where the family structure is something that is quite key, whereby kumkhulu, ubaba, nendodana, and kubekho uma nentombi, and how all these actually within the churches, the African initiate churches, these kind of signifiers and ways of speaking to self, to our own ontology in understanding our spirituality becomes something. And what also becomes interesting is that it is how izibongo nethakazelo are revered in how to refer to abantu of different clan names, within this. So this is part of sort of what I call praxis of spiritualities. So let me move to my next slide. Also, I'd like to think about the Amakola and the public spheres. And on the left image, it is a book cover by Ulindo Ngozi, where we see Abomama Bomanyano, which is kind of known as like a Wesleyan church. But I think in the Black church, the Manyano is the longest standing and the most prolific African matriarchal organization. And the Manyano actually it has been characterized as a union of mothers who are mostly recognized by their distinct uniform and for their revivalist prayer meetings and spirituality. Firstly recognized in rural Natal, in Transkei and northwestern Transvaal. These were meetings to formally structured the Manyano movement. And I think within Manyano movement here, I think what becomes important is how women, it is a space that they use it as a space for them to not just pray, but also I think to foster the ideas of the role of women within public spheres, but also understanding as to what is the role of Amanina, essentially, within Black, or rather within African initiated churches. Yeah. So the church emerged as a site where Black people mobilized and constructed political ideas in order to resist and overthrow colonial occupation and apartheid regime in South Africa. And it is important to recognize that women occupy the dominant space within the Black church. Their emergence in the public in both overt and covert ways foregrounds centrality of motherhood, ubufazi, and the role occupied by women shaped the way in which women entered the political arena and the conception of identity struggles around gender and race. And particularly in this point, I was thinking about the role of a prophet, Unonteta Nkwenkwe, who was one of the women who actually opened a church in Middle Drift here in the Eastern Cape, where ibandla lakhe literally because she was a prophet and she was prophesying a lot of what was happening during like the apartheid times, but also then the state at the time, which is now the state apparatus, uses basically her gifts basically as a seer and someone who had visions to kind of define her as someone who is categorized as mentally sort of who has a psychological problem. But also I think the state at the time when it came to how Nondeta was, because Nondeta actually, the church itself that she initiated actually was very much like a political site where it wasn't just about people coming to congregate and understand themselves, but I think it was a space where how they understand their own ontology, how they understand what is the role of Black people and what ought to happen during the time of apartheid and times of subjugation. So in a way, for Blacks saw themselves through the prophet and the leader, Unondeta, as someone who was quite advocative for ways of understanding African spiritual ways of sort of ways of activating, but also ways of seeing sort of people seeing themselves, but also people talking to their own realities at the time. So in this point, I'd like to just show a video which kind of gives a glimpse into who Nondeta was. Okay, I think I'll start it. Yeah.
Wemka nejoin uphepha. Khomokazi. Mdaka. Wena ubona pho singaboniyo thina. Emid drift. Eqedi. Ebhokolo. Epretoria. Emid drift. Eqedi. Eqongweni. Ebhokolo emaketeni. Epretoria. Emid drift. Ebhokolo emaketeni. Epretoria. Eqedi. Eqongweni. Epretoria. Ebhokolo. Eqedi. Ebhokolo. Epretoria.
stop it there for the sake of time. So Unondeta the prophet Unondeta becomes someone who becomes quite interesting because herself as a black female who leads a church, a congregation, who starts a church, and how she becomes a threat to the political regime at the time during the apartheid time, but also how she's stigmatized actually because she becomes a threat and she's stigmatized, but also her demise of then her role, her body, also her agency as a black female who starts a church, who leads a group of men and women, subsequently taken to Pretoria. Then the congregation actually later on, they marched to Pretoria because they felt that she was incarcerated wrongly, in essence. So, but again, I think the centrality of women within black churches, and but what is interesting for me is what is kind of presented here as what I kind of call is Tonzi and also Seriti. And Seriti is presented in two forms, in a form of a sonic aspect, singing, which is the rhythm, and also the need to overtly pronounce the veneration of the ancestors, to call them out, Israeli, Ukuzingula, Ukuzithuta. So these become all important with the initiation, with the advent of the African initiated churches in South Africa. At this point, let's move. Then in this regard, also, I've been thinking about the notion of umoya and what is umoya and how we define umoya. But also with a lot of African initiated churches, they are being referred to as Ikawa Umoya, Amabandla Umoya, So it becomes interesting then how this is also quite captured by the contemporary musician Usjava. So I will play a song, Usjava. Yeah.
At Caputech, we don't care how much you earn, or if you've been with us for 8 years.
fela vumo, fela vumo, fela vumo. Manyotos, but never tell, but never to mela your trust. Banye bati luto, menzeli kovo. Manyotos, but never tell, but never to mela your trust. Banye bati luto, menzeli kovo. Now the fellow engan, now the fellow engan, now the fellow engan, now the fellow engan. I don't know my engan, yes, you're again. To sing the sea, utamatimo, utamatimo nova, utamatimo, utamatimo nova, utamatimo. 0357 9957 03 shall the number, I'll told you season 0357 9957 03 shall the number, I'll told you season. My gosh, on a lenga, Namalogu in Waba, but holding no papa. Ngerangashuna, Tokula Mato, Razulu Yavi, when he's sending back, I won't go Shalamakola, Tokula Mato, Razulu Yavi, when he's sending back, I won't go Shalamakola, Tumdana Maku, Taga Kolupuna, my fingers calling, Fella Fumo, Tumdana Maku, Taga Kolula, Taga Damavi, Fella Fumo. Fella for more, fella for more, fella for more, fella for more. Man, your trust, but you never can, but you never tell your trust. Banye bati luto, benzeli kovo. Man, your trust, but you never can, but you never tell your trust. Banye bati luto, benzeli kovo.
I think Java really kind of captures the gist of the conversation in the song, where I was thinking also it's kind of tying to the notion of the title of this presentation of Ukumele Kufundwa Nakabani, where in this song, really, I think we see the interface of the state apparatus, or rather like the notion of the state apparatuses basically between there's a veneration towards the song itself, where it the child goes to school and this child gets sick, and then now the nemesis is because umuntu ikholwa, and is ikholwa, do you take the child to isangoma? When it comes to isangoma, which is again another form of, then there whereby now you understand that there is this kind of a fracture or divide, that where what people really believe in, and also the integral part of what is the component of umuntu, but also tying to the problem that, or rather like the cautionary measure in which Mudrika is bringing in abantu ukuthi sikhohliwe thina bantu bamnyama. But again, Java here, I think, speaks to really quite a sort of like a structural problems, where between the church, the schooling system, and how the interplay of all the spiritualities actually, whether one, it is the kind of, rather also like sort of intimate toward Uguti, what people really do they believe, and what constitutes umoya and spirituality in essence. So in this instance, I will move to the next slide. So I want to talk about ukoboga, and ukoboga, it means to be pierced by the words. And in this instance, I was thinking of one of the very early Black missionaries, Reverend
Sorry, Sikhumbuzo.
Yes.
You have 5 minutes left.
Okay,
so-
I'm about to conclude. All right. So I was thinking of Reverend Soga and the song that he composes, Ulizarisitingalako, where the song actually is a rhetorical question if you think about it, because the question really is, have we fulfilled our promise of land? Where the two last verses, they read as yala singachabalali, usiphe ukhanyiso, usiphile ukhanyiso bawo ungasibulali, ukudelela inyaniso. Nkosi, khawusikelele imfundiso zezwe lethu uze usivuselele siphuthume ukulunga. You know, so I think Dio Soga really is one person who was really from a mainline church, not necessarily from a Black Initiated Church. But I think himself, his status were the embodiment of theological life, the subject of our conversation, but also an embodiment of sociological, political, and economic knowledge form associated with modernity, integrated nonetheless as experience described in his life and of Black people, in essence. So in this regard, I'm about to end basically where I was also thinking with talking about decolonizing, decoloniality at a moment in South Africa whereby there was a moment where everything, where students in South Africa were claiming that, so this is a cover of African Arts. It's an academic publication, journal, which comes every quarterly. In the photographs, it's a work of Tembele Msezane, where when the statue of Cecil John Rhodes, which is a settler, was taken down, it didn't fall, it was taken down. I think we need to be very clear about the fact that Rhodes did not fall, but Rhodes was actually, the statue was taken down in a way. So in this instance, which captures this moment, I think where here, again, Umsezane is actually what she intimates toward is the centrality of the Black female body within the public sphere, and how then she becomes advocative of these moments, these integral moments of speaking to how this statue also post the statue itself, actually, because it had to do with how we see ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. But in essence, I think I would like to rather end in this notes, in conclusion, in essence. I think, okay, let me just basically just try and finish up my, because I think what's important is like to speak to the practice of spirituality. And here, I'm really quite like really drawing from the work of Professor Willem, Vuyani Willem, who is a theologian, a Black theologian, when he says that it is difficult to describe spirituality as it has many sides. And also spirituality for life in a Black theology of liberation is, amongst others, the energy to holding on to life in conditions of death. All of the life is regarded as spiritual without any dichotomies, hence a cry for life, and that power to resist death, providing strength to lives, puts our understanding of God as embedded in the struggles of the marginalized, which is the majority Black. Importantly, conquest was a violent displacement of spheres of knowledge, spirituality, economics, and human relations in general. So spatial justice in South Africa is not an abstract discourse. So in this, in ending or in concluding, I'd like to close just with a brief song by Bitswaeli.